it, hit it.
Hi everybody, I'm Marley Bird and you're watching the Marley Bird YouTube channel. In this video, you're going to learn how to make a thick ribbed scarf. Now this is made using a combination of knit stitches and purl stitches wider than the traditional knit 1 purl 1 or knit 2 purl 2. We're actually going to do a knit 7 and then a purl 7 to create a really super cute scarf. This scarf was designed by Michelle Max and is a free pattern available for download over at redheart.com. If you join me down here, I'm going to show you what you need to get started. For this video, you want to make sure you download the pattern over at redheart.com for the thick ribbed beginner scarf. You're also going to need a pair of size 9 or size 5.5 millimeter knitting needles, and you're going to need a skein of Red Heart with Love yarn. This particular scarf was made using the lettuce colorway, and that's the one I'm going to use today to demonstrate how to do these stitches. For my demonstration and for my little tips and tricks, I'm actually going to also include that you should get 2 stitch markers. Now, they don't have to be stitch markers like these. They can be any stitch markers you want to use, but this is the most important part, is that you want to make sure they are 2 different colors, and you're going to be able to see why here in just a second. Now, in the pattern, it states that you need to use your size 9 or 5.5 millimeter knitting needles and cast on 35 stitches. I've already done that. I've cast on 35 stitches. I use the long tail cast on, but if you want to use a knitted cast on or a cable cast on, you absolutely could do that. I have 35 stitches and I begin to work my rib pattern. To do that, I am using circular needles, but I am not working circularly. I'm placing the needle with all the stitches on it into my left hand and the needle with no stitches into my right hand, just like you normally would if they were 2 individual needles. The pattern states that I'm going to begin with a knit 3. So if you can see, I'm holding my tail out of the way. The reason I do that is because I want to make sure I don't accidentally knit with my tail, because that's a pain in the rear. I'm going to go ahead and take my right hand needle. I go into the stitch just like to knit, yarn over my right hand needle, and then pull that stitch through the needle and off. I'm going to do that again. Go in, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. Now I have 3 more I need to do, and I'm going to do them holding my yarn cotton or English, so that way you guys can see how that works as well. I go in, around, out, off. In, around, out, and off. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, one more. In, around, out, off. Now here's where the stitch markers come into play. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my silver stitch marker right now after these first 7 stitches. The reason I'm doing that is because in the pattern, it states that the next section of this pattern is the repeat section, and the first 7 here is like the start off row. Now, the reason I made the stitch markers different colors is the silver stitch marker is going to let me know that this is a row 1. Okay, so when I put down my knitting and I take a couple days off and I pick it back up and I'm just like, which row am I on? If I make a note in my pattern that the silver stitch marker, if that's the one facing me, like it's the one closest to the end that I'm working on, is there, then I know that that is a row 1. Okay, so I'm using not only a stitch marker to signify that these 7 stitches are not part of my repeat, I'm also using it to let me know, okay, when I look at that marker, that's my row 1. I go ahead and I continue on in pattern, and it says that I'm going to repeat purl 7 and then knit 7. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring my yarn between my needles to purl, take my right hand needle, go into the stitch as if to purl it, and off. So in, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. So there's 3. In, around, out, off. Now let's do that with my yarn in my other hand. You'll notice that it's the exact same motion. It's just I put my yarn in a different hand. Now, those of you who've been watching the knitting videos know that continental is my preferred method of knitting, and so I'm a little bit slower when it comes to English, so forgive me. In, around. So you'll notice around, I'm not going around this way. You want to go around where it's over top. It's like you're going over top of the needle and back down, out, off, in, around, out, off. So that should be 7. And it's really convenient because I have the marker there to let me know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now it's time to knit. I bring my yarn between my needles so that it's in position to knit. And I go ahead and I knit 7. In, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. You can see how this becomes very repetitive. Out, off, in, around, out, off, in, around, out, off. Now let's count how many I've done. Now I don't have the convenient stitch marker here this time to let me know where I started my stitches again, but what I do have is the stitches that I did before were purls. So I have these nice little purl bumps to let me know, okay, when I no longer see a purl bump, I know I'm on a knit stitch. So I can see there's a purl bump right there, but right here there isn't. So that's my first knit stitch. So I can start counting from there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have one more. So in, around, out, and then off. Now I have to go on and I do 7 purls. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to Continental. So those of you who are curious how to purl Continental, this is how I do it. Bring my yarn between my needles. I go in, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. In, you see that? I'm in, around, out, then off. In, around, out, off. See that? Once again, I can go back here and it's the reverse now. I can see where I don't have a purl bump, and when I do have one, that's where I'm going to start counting. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is all I've completed so far. 5, 6, 7. So now I'm going to finish off with a knit 7. So I have my yarn, I went between my needles, back to the back, and I knit 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. I go ahead, I switch needles, and I'm going to start off here at the beginning. Now, just like before, the first 7 stitches are not part of the repeat on this row. So this is where I'm going to put my marker. We begin with the purl 7. So I bring my yarn to the front and I go ahead and I purl my 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I can see in the pattern that this is where the repeat begins. And I know that because it has an asterisk right next to the next part of the instructions. So I'm going to take my opposite color stitch marker, place it directly onto my needle, and carry on in my pattern. Now I know that if I pick up my needle and this is the stitch marker at the closest end where I'm getting ready to work, I'm beginning a row 2. So I could carry on and I would just go ahead and I would knit my knits and purl my purls, which right now it begins with a knit 7 and then it goes on to purl 7. I am going to set this down once I get down to the end of this row to show you how you would slip the marker when you come to it. It's really easy. There's not a big trick to it, but if it's the first time you've ever used markers, it could be a little bit different for you. And so I want to make sure you know how to do that. I went ahead and purled my 7. I'm back to knit 7. And I'm coming up to my marker right here. When I get to my marker, all you have to do is take your right hand needle and just slip the marker off the left needle directly onto the right needle. So it's not actually worked into any particular stitch. It's literally just resting between the stitches directly onto your needle, just like that. It just rests there and no problem. So I moved it. Now I move my yarn between my needles and I finish off with my purl 7. You continue on in this manner for this particular scarf, repeating rows 1 and 2 until the piece measures approximately 60 inches. You can make it longer or shorter depending on what type of scarf you're looking for. It's totally up to you. And that's as easy as it is. So once you do that, you're going to bind off in the ribbing pattern. And what that means is when you bind off, you will knit the knits and purl the purls. And when you get 2 stitches onto your right hand needle, you go ahead and have the back stitch jump the front stitch just like before. So I'm going to show you that last bit, and then I'm going to let you out of here so that you can go make your very own thick ribbed scarf. So these first stitches here, these are 7 knit stitches. So they are bind off just like if we say regular bind off. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to knit 2 stitches, knit 1, knit 2. And just like a regular bind off, we take our left hand needle, go into the stitch that's behind the first needle or the first stitch on the right hand needle, and you're going to have it jump up and over that second stitch. Okay. I call it leapfrogging. So what happens is it jumps up and over. You see that? I let it fall off my left hand needle and I'm left with that 1 stitch. I go in and around, I knit the next one, and I do it one more time, up and over. So now those stitches are bind off. It's like we have put the stitch that we just completed. So I just completed that stitch, and we're going to draw it through the middle of that one by having that one jump up and over it. Okay. So I continue on doing that. I'm going to get over to where there's some purls so you can see what I mean by binding off in the rib pattern. I'm here to my last knit. I'm up to my marker. I just go ahead, take my marker off and set it aside because I don't need it anymore. And I'm coming up to purl stitches. So to bind off in the rib pattern, which means I would continue on purling these. So I bring my yarn between my needles, go into the stitch as if to purl, I purl it. And now I go ahead and just like before, the back stitch jumps over the front stitch. Just like before, the only difference here is that this stitch here that we just finished was a purl instead of a knit. Up and over. You see that? I purl the next one. I go into the back, up and over. You would do this all the way down the row, and you can see it begins to bind off all of these nice stitches here. So they're no longer live, except for that one right there. You do that down the entire row. When you get to the end of the row, let's pretend we're at the end of the row, okay? You go ahead, you grab your scissors, cut your yarn, always leave 4 to 6 inches of a tail. So that way you have something to weave in later on. Nothing worse than having a tail that's too short. You get down here to the end. If this was the end of the row, remember, we're pretending this is the end of the row. Don't do this in the middle of your scarf. You're going to take your needle, go ahead and pull that working loop that's on your needle up and out, give it a tug, and your stitches are all bound off and you're ready to go with your really cute thick ribbed scarf. It's that simple. Okay, now you know how to make the thick ribbed scarf by Michelle Max. Once again, the pattern is available for free over at redheart.com. Also at Red Heart, you will find a link to all the materials you'll need for this particular pattern. The only thing you will need to add to it are the stitch markers if you want to use my little tip of being able to add the stitch markers where the repeat begins for each row, so that way you have a little cue of when you're on row 1 or when you're on row 2. I hope you enjoyed this video as it's part of the Learn to Knit series right here on the Marley Bird channel. I hope you'll come back for more. And as my kids say, please smash that like button. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.